What's up, everybody? Sean Koppel here for Poker VIP. Back with some 2-5 Zoom action, but now for PLO week here at Poker VIP. Let's get this footage rolling. Table 1, we go ahead and defend, blind versus blind. By the way, so we're going to have 3 tables with the corner in the bottom right for hand reviews. So we face a 1/3 pot bet here on table 1. Make a light peel. I think for a bigger c-bet size we can fold, but my plan is to try and take it away on some turn cards, this being a decent one to try it on. And also we improve to the best hand on the 4 and sometimes on an ace. So I think it's an okay spot to peel. Table 2, we defend out of the small blind, just flatting the under the gun open. I think 3-betting is a little too aggressive versus an under the gun open. Stab on the turn, face a raise from the big blind, and just fold our hand. So we get called on the turn on table 1, and I think we still need to be bluffing here given our line up to this point. Obviously, this is the worst hand we're getting to the river with. And while we don't have a 10 or a queen in our hand, we don't hold any diamonds, so we unblock some of those. So I think betting is good and betting bigger is better. We also delay c-bet on table 3, where we flop top pair, take it down. Get looked up, you rivered the second boat, so I guess third boat. But yeah, not expecting that one to ever fold, but I think we're going to get enough folds for that to be a profitable bluff there on the river. Table 2, we go ahead and flat kings against an unknown player. Against somebody that you know is opening kind of wide, like 25-30%. It's certainly a fine hand to be 3-betting, pretty mediocre kings. When you're able to get the stack to pot ratio kind of down, lower it into your favor for a hand that doesn't tend to flop all that well that often. Here we face a 1/3 bet on a board that's not very good for us, but I think that fold is a little too tight. Facing, again, like a more standard 2/3 type of c-bet size, we can probably fold, especially with the short stack in the small blind, kind of, putting us in an awkward spot, stuck in the middle there. Easy fold on table 1 after the 3-bet. Had it not been 3-bet, we would be taking a flop with that hand. Go ahead and give up there on the river on table 3, which I think is fine. I don't think we're going to get too many folds. Top pair and a gutter to the nuts. I think we have a pretty clear-cut call there on table 2. Table 1, kings and jacks from a cutoff open. Pretty standard 3-bet. And yeah, not a great flop, but stack to pot of 1.5. Being out of position, I think we just want to jam, or size to effectively jam, which is what we do with the kings and jacks. We do have 2 extra outs. We also have backdoor straight draw and backdoor diamonds, so it's probably enough. In position, you can argue with checking back there. Table 2, turn goes check-check, and we river 2 pair, so we have a pretty clear value bet in this situation. Standard open here on the button, table 1. On the flop here, you can go either way. I think this player in the small blind defends pretty wide, like flatting from the small blind, so he will actually, in this case, have some 5x, and the big blind obviously is going to have a lot more 5x than everybody else. So we check back the flop, and facing pretty big bet where we make top pair. It's not great top pair, but we make a pair and a king high flush draw, but I think we just want to let this one go. Open the button with kind of a marginal hand, and I don't really like folding non-paired hands in position of 3-bets. I don't think most players fold. This is a really shitty hand, especially against a pretty solid player. It's going to put you in some difficult situations with a hand that may not realize enough of its equity in that situation, even though it's in position. But yeah, flopping top pair on a straight board, I think we just want to fold, even with the ace of hearts blocker for the nut flush draw. With the stack to pot ratio already being pretty low, it's going to be hard to get any hands to fold, I think. Flop the nuts after we flatten the small blind. When you flop this kind of hand, or this kind of board in general, from the big blind, I think you want to be leading a decent bit. In the small blind, though, you're going to have a lot tighter of a range, and that's going to be a range that doesn't hit this board all that much. So, yeah, I think checking the flop here is good. Turn, we're obviously betting for value, and the river, while it looks like it kind of changes things, doesn't really. In fact, if he has something like 6-5, 6-4, he's more likely to call us now. We bet he does not call us, so that's that. Just pull this back a second. So we check back the flop on table 2, which I think is really standard. Small blind leads again. It's that same player. And while I think you can probably peel this hand on this board against just that bet, after the big blind calls, we just need to lay this down. We're very often going to be drawing dead at that point to a 10. So I think, yeah, we have a pretty clear fold there. Go ahead and c-bet on table 1 with the gutter and the ace of hearts. Very blank turn, which gives us a second gutter. Here I check to go for check raise. Yeah, with SPR of under 3, I think it's a decent line to take sometimes. Particularly against players that might be stabbing with a lot of their King X, betting for protection. And then also, their draws that want to stab. On the King River, though, on that hand in table 1, clearly no more value, and it checks through. And we win. Table 2, let's rewind. So we c-bet, and now looks like we face a bet on this turn. Obviously not a good turn card, and I think facing this bet, very few hands on this player. Haven't really played with him at all. I think we can just go ahead and fold. Table 1 with a gutter and no hearts. I guess the standard, you can just go ahead and check fold here. I think check raising might be a little bit too much, a little too over the top. But leading is an option. I think you do want to be leading some of your 8x and some of your better draws here. So this bet is pretty protected, and it's not like we have so much equity that we're annoyed if we get raised on the flop. Turn brings in the bottom straight, and we continue betting and take it down. Waiting to get some hands. I think there was a decent amount of players in this pool at the time, but this is a slight hiccup. Easy open on table 3 from the button. And a very easy call of the 3-bet as well. And again, flop pretty poorly overall. There's no real blockers to any of the straight draws that we have. It's not like we get paid off if we do hit a diamond. We do get paid if we hit a 7, I guess, but I don't think that's a flop we need to be peeling. plan to open up this hand on table 3. Yeah, this brings up, I guess, there's a little bit of a lag in the action right now, or lull in the action. So, just as I say that. So, table 1, kind of looser player opens from the cutoff, and this hand is right around the borderline, I think, of what we want to be 3-betting. Like, clearly you want to be 3-betting a linear value type of range, and while I don't know exactly what this player is opening, like, his range could consist of, some players that raise kind of tight by the numbers still like raising, the lower, crappier rundowns, and not things like queen, 6-3 when they have short stacks. So, while I don't know that, this hand is going to do okay against just a loose, wide range. Trips in the big blind, I think we can just fold this one, even though it is connected and suited. So yeah, I want to mention this quickly. So in this review, there's going to be some spots where I want to bring up some hands in this bottom right corner to analyze, but for whatever reason, Stars software, even though rank's gone up and rewards have gone down, they can't keep their software up to date. So, some hands just ended up disappearing into the poker internet ether, or whatever it is, and unfortunately won't be able to review some of the spots that are going to come up later in this session. So I would say I'd apologize for that, but really you should just blame Stars. Table 2, pretty standard C-bet. Looks like we were shorter stacked. Forgot to put the auto reload on for you guys, but clear get in, and can't see exactly what he's got, but we're basically dead on the turn, so I assumed it was 4. Yeah, so he has 4 with the nut flush draw. His flat call is pretty marginal, in my opinion. But with kind of another player calling in a cutoff, and I don't know the player in the big blind, it could be okay. So we see that table 1 turn the straight in a spot where we should basically never have anything when we open under the gun here. So I decided to check, hoping that the button is going to stab in this spot. He doesn't, and the big blind checks again, and now we need to decide if we want to bet and try and get value from something. And I think we actually want to check again and hope that the button decides to stab. And there's a few reasons for that. So he can have 9-10, which makes a lot of sense, and makes sense for him to value bet this river with, given the capped range, or what he can perceive to be as capped ranges from myself and the big blind. I don't think he's going to show up with too many 4 or 5 type of stuff that might call this river bet from us. So again, I don't have any reads on this player on the button. He snap checks. We take it down. Looks like I'm trying to review it. Okay, so yeah, he ends up with a hand that very reasonable flop peel, and then checking down for showdown from both players. But the reason I'm checking the turn and the river is a spot where I guess I'll have some ace-3, like ace-king, 10-3 type of random stuff there. But besides that, I'm not going to really ever have very much on this turn card. And so I'm checking almost my full range on this card, especially when called by 2 players. Table 3, we open the button. Pretty standard flop. Okay, but not a spot we really want to be betting. Table 2, yeah, that's table 2. 3-bet the aces, flop the nuts on, again, a board that's not so good for our range, and a board that we'll be checking very, very often. Turn isn't great, obviously. but I think we can bet for protection, or we can check and hope to induce some bluffs as well. Table 3, we face the pot bet on the turn when we turn the open ender and flush draw, river the flush, have a pretty clear value bet. Checks again on the turn on table 2. I think here we can go either way. We can bet. Well, it's hard to see like what's calling this bet, except like kings makes some sense. That's why he should never have boats here, except like Jack 7. But most combos that are opening Jack 7 are going to have a straight that's going to want to bet on the flop and or turn. So I think it's okay. Betting small. Go ahead and complete not good, not bad hand out of the small blind. Flop bottom pair and just gonna fold that one away. I think that's pretty standard. Flop top 2, c-bet and take it down on table 3. Again, like I don't think you want to be checking too often when you're, even with a player left to act behind you on that kind of board. Table 1 flop that I think we would just have to check fold facing a c-bet. We turn trips and go ahead and bet for value. You can mix in some, given that we held some diamonds on that hand in table 1, I think you can mix in some check calls as well, because you have less of a need for protection. Go ahead and limp, planning to limp call with the ace 9-9. It's not a great hand to play out of position in a 3-bet pot. Go ahead and bet for value protection on the flop. Take it down out of position. Table 3, we make a pretty marginal defend after the hijack opens, and looks like 12-0. Damn, dude is tight after 50 hands. You can probably just fold that hand. And like as you see, we flop top pair on a not so great board and just end up folding anyway. So I think that's the spot that, especially if you're playing kind of more solid, tougher players, it's a hand we can probably just let go before the flop. Open up kings. So 3 aces, 4-way with no club. I think, yeah, we can just check and probably bet if we get to the turn here on table 1. Yeah, so I think now we can delay c-bet. Table 3, so Ilari, this is, yeah. He 3-bets on the button, and the big blind flat calls. This is a spot I think we just want to 4-bet, and if they have aces on the button here, they have aces on the button. But the big blind never should have it. Like, he definitely wants to be 4-betting his aces in this situation. And obviously, like, button versus cutoff is a situation where the button, correctly is going to assume that there's a relatively wide cutoff opening range and is going to 3-bet semi-wide as well. And kings are definitely a favorite against, it depends on what their button 3-bet range looks like, but against most regulars, balanced, strongish button 3-bet range, these kings are still pushing some equity, and there are definitely some kings that want to get the stack to pot ratio down as low as possible to be able to jam pretty much every flop. So, looks like I'm debating 4-betting, but I think this is a pretty clear spot to be 4-betting. Flop about as good as we can, besides flopping king, and big blind open jams. Table 2, we flat ace, jack, jack. You can 3-bet this hand as well. I think it plays fine either way. so looks like we get there on the river. I really don't like this cold call of the 3-bet with that hand. Especially because it is a spot where my 4-bet range is going to be relatively wide, given I open the cutoff and the button 3-bets. So yeah, I think the player in the big blind there should just fold that hand pre-flop facing the 3-bet. We peeled table 2, which I think is fine. Turn 10. We can consider turning our hand into a bluff here. And I think probably at the time I considered doing it. But we are going to have some hands we want to bluff with more so in that spot, particularly hearts without any showdown value. So there, I think we're kind of high up in our value showdown range with jacks there to turn it into a bluff. Though, I could be convinced otherwise. Table 1, we defend pretty marginal queen-jack hand that again, like you can maybe consider just folding pre. We peel the flop, and on the turn, we improved a gutter, but a lot of the outs are dirty at this point, and I think we can just fold our hand out of position. Table 3, I think you get flat, ace-jack-5, deuce, double suited the good way, but I decided to make a fold from the cutoff, which I think is also fine. You definitely want to pay attention to the players that are left to act behind you when considering hands to flat with. Like, you definitely want to select the hands that will play well in multi-way pots, as well as hands that can hold up in 3-bet pots. So, hands that don't do that well are things like, sorry to pick on this player again, but yeah, something like Jack, Jack 10, 5 single suited, for example, would not be a good hand to be flatting. Tends not to play so well multi-way, and its value really, really drops in 3-bet pots. So, action on 2 tables now. Table 1, I think we just have a pretty clear call with a second nut flush draw. We have some cards that will allow us to bluff on some straight outs that come down. And table 2, we make a c-bet with, flop the world, top pair nut flush draw. Bad turn card for us, though. So probably going to be checking back there. Player checks on table 1. This guy's a pretty solid regular. You can, so we can certainly stab here on the turn, but I think we can also check the turn and still bluff some cards when we don't improve, particularly like a jack, a 10, maybe a 6 as well, maybe even an 8, turning that into a bluff. So I'd like to have a card that would block a straight draw as choosing the one to bluff with. So table 2, we get led into on the turn, which I think is a fine play with a decent part of the big blind's range. This clearly gives him way more nut combos than we have when we open from the hijack. And I think if I don't have the king of diamonds here on the turn, we can just fold. Like, that's a pretty reasonable amount. But with the king of diamonds here, along with the actual nut spade draw, I think we can call with a plan to bluff diamonds. Like, he seems to be a quite tight player, so I think that's a decent strategy. And again, like, on the diamonds and the spades, I think we want to be betting big, pretty big. Table 1, we get, looks like that's exactly what's going to happen here. So table 1, we get check 2 on the river again, and this is about as good a card to bluff on as we could ask for. And decide to go ahead and bluff. Gets through on table 1. Is it getting through on table 2? Find out. To be continued. It does. Bang, bang. Make it sort of tight, but okay, fold table 1 on the button there. Table 3, obviously a pretty junky hand, but closing the action with 10s, pretty standard defend, I would say. Go ahead and fold on turn. Turn the nuts here on table 1. So this board is, in general, going to be really good for our small blind flatting range. Like, we're going to have a decent amount of 2-pair, a decent amount of sets, and a decent amount of straights. So you do want to have a leading range here, and this is a hand. I think you basically want to mix with a whole bunch of your actual value holdings. That said, the hijack here is also going to have quite a lot. Like, he improves on this queen a lot to, some 2-pairs, some straights, and also some sets. So I think going either way, leading out or checking to check raise. Looks like he's quite short, so I'm debating check calling and letting him potentially bluff. But like I said, this card is going to improve him a lot, and I think we want to just get the money in, given how short stacked he is, just there on the turn. And yeah, shows us some queens. Like, I think he played this hand pretty perfectly. Like, the flop check is clearly the best play for him. And then, he's obviously in a tough spot when he gets check raised on the turn. But maybe he can lay it down and then probably stack off when he does have a blocker to the straight. So if he has like ace, queen, queen, or queen, queen, 10, he can go ahead and call off. But certainly not a terrible call by him, especially if you're playing in, pretty aggressive games, which 2-5 zoom is relatively aggro. So this player who's 13-0 over 67 hands, limp re-raises under the gun, and he's really short. We're not going to be able to... There's not enough effectively behind to call this 3-bet. We also open ourselves up to potentially getting 4-bet by the guy who covers us, and we're, relatively deep at this point. So I think I would prefer to see myself just fold this hand. If he were full stacked, probably just take flop. 3-bet Alari with about the best unpaired hand you can have, and flop the nut flush draw on a board that neither of us is gonna have a big range advantage on. But yeah, I think we want to just start out betting, building a pot with the nut flush draw. And, if we do get raised, probably end up playing for stacks. Open a pretty double pair hand, 4-way flop. Yeah, we have the best straight blockers that we can have, but I would rather have diamond blockers to be bluffing on this flop, which we don't. And so, yeah, I think we just want to check here to give up, maybe bluff on a river if we can get there. So, open on table 1. I think you can go either way here on the flop, c-betting or checking back. It's obviously not a great spot if we get check raised, but we do want some protection and get some value from, decent flush draws and other straight draws that, will be calling a flop bet. When we get check 2 again on the turn, though, now I think we clearly have the best hand and want to be betting for the same reasons I argued for betting the flop. We flop the nuts on table 3 with the redraw, and this is a board that I don't think is going to get bet at very often, and this is obviously a board where we have a pretty good range advantage in the big blind. And yeah, I think there was a similar spot earlier in this session that came up where we were in the small blind on a similar type of board texture, where on this kind of board, the small blind range doesn't hit it so well, but the big blind range does. And so I think this is when we want to be leading ourselves. So pre-flop raiser goes ahead and calls us, and then get called again. Turn brings another straight draw, which we now hold kind of no blockers to. I think at this point we want to size up. You know, betting pretty big. Yeah, I think something like 80% would be the best sizing here. Get 3-bet on table 1, very clear call. Table 2, you can make an argument for bluffing here, given no one's shown like any interest in this pot. But yeah, I would just much rather have a diamond in my hand in order to do it. So table 1, we flop pretty well. Like if we had 100 big blinds, I think you can be comfortable just check shoving here or bet shoving. But we're not. Like we're relatively deep here, and I think check raising, like getting it in against the continuing range against our check raise, we're actually doing pretty badly against that. Like we're just gonna have we're gonna be up against aces, nut flush draw, kings with flush draw, hands that really crush our equity. And so I think here is the spot we just want to be check calling, given the depths that we're at. Back to table 3. So player in the hijack calls the turn bet, and at this point, like our range is, I mean, I guess we have some sets along with straights, but yeah, we're clearly repping a very polar range here, and I think we just want to be betting full pot in that type of situation. So flop checks through on table 1. I think we could go either way here. Given we have a decent amount of showdown value, I don't think betting is necessary here. Also, I think it's probably unlikely we get a fold here on the turn. Like, given we open under the gun and the hijack's the one 3-betting us, his 3-bet range is obviously much stronger than if, you know, it's cut up versus button or button versus small blind or whatever. So he's going to have something most likely that does not want to fold to 1-bet, and we have more than enough equity to continue in some way. So yeah, I think in those types of situations, you don't need to automatically default to like, oh, I have a pair and a good draw, I should just go ahead and bet. You want to be thinking about, you know, what does this other player represent, like given the action prior, and is it likely to, like, what's my most plus EV option here? And I think both strategies are clearly plus EV. Like, obviously, check folding is minus EV, but the other options all have merit, and you want to kind of go through the different scenarios of what they can have, how your hand's going to stack up there, and does it need protection? Does it want to bluff? And this is a hand that doesn't really need to bluff, given we have some showdown value. Granted, we're not likely ahead on the turn, but I think we just have enough to check call in this spot. And now we're in a pretty difficult situation here, where he bets pretty big on the river, where we make a straight, but the diamond draw comes in. And I think this is a very credible line for a river flush. And I guess obviously for like aces with diamonds, just the diamond blocker as well. Although I think that hand may be much more likely to just c-bet the flop without having the backdoor flush draw. So I think, yeah, this is a close spot, but I think folding is probably best. Though, yeah, if somebody wanted to like run it in Poker Juice or something and check it out in greater detail, you know, could prove me wrong. That, you know, maybe he does have just the blank ace of diamonds and is turning a pair into a bluff. Table 3, so we defend. Yeah, it looks like it goes hijack open, button call, and we defend in the small blind, and the big blind also calls. This, like, without the 2 backdoor flush draws, I think this actually should be a fold. And even with them, it's really close because, well, the big blind is still left to act. And, I mean, while we're all very, very deep, makes him kind of less likely to check raise something like 9-5, 7-8. He still might. And we're also in a really bad relative position. Well, absolute and relative position. So, like, I wouldn't mind making a tight fold. And also, yeah, the player in the big blind and the button are both very solid. So, I think it's going to be hard to kind of over-realize our equity in this spot. It is nice that, you know, when we do turn an 8, that we now have, like, the gut shot free roll, and, you know, potentially when it's like the 8 of spades or the 8 of diamonds, now we have, you know, some extra free roll equity. At least potentially, you know, if we're up against another 6-7. But with the 7 of spades on the turn, I think we just, have to check fold, and that's what ends up happening. So, yeah, it looks like we got called. We have a big stack on table 3, and looks like I was trying to figure out, so you see me kind of like scrambling around trying to find this big pot that we won with the 4-5 where we got looked up, and this was one of those hands that just kind of disappeared into Never Land, wherever the hell it went. So, I'm not sure what we were called with in that spot, but I would guess it was a set. Trip aces, no suit, 300 big blinds deep. Really can't be 3-betting this hand. So, just have to call. It's really a crappy spot, obviously, with such bad aces. But you can't fold. So, have to call it and play some flops. He checks back on, obviously a very bad flop for our hand. We're just going to check fold when we are faced with a bet here. When he checks, though, I think we want to bet for some protection. And, I like this decision to bet full pot. Most of my range that is betting here is going to want to bet full pot. Whether it's 8-9, Jack-10, and the better draws that I have, I think they're all sizing really high on a board this dynamic. So I like the decision to bet full pot here, and we get the best river in the deck, basically. And we're now going to try and decide, do we want to value bet, or do we want to check and pick off some bluffs? And in order to kind of go through that, we want to think about what are his realistic holdings that check back the flop and continue on the turn. And I think, Jack-10 makes some sense. Jack-10 without much backup, like Jack-10, I don't know, 9-6, maybe that decided to 3-bet light. King-Queen something, maybe Queen-Queen-King, King-King-Queen. And then also, so some things like 10-Queen-9, potentially even like a wrap that checks back the flop, though probably not this stacked up. So I think it's quite close between betting and checking. I think betting is probably better. I don't think we're getting bluff raised by Jack-10 here on the river. So, I think I would like to see myself have bet in this spot to try and get some calls from kings, which are not going to bet themselves. They're just going to take Showdown. Along with, basically everything. Jack-10, kings are all taking Showdown. We don't have, we have a diamond, but it's not a relevant diamond. So we do kind of unblock some of his draws, which is the other side of this coin, with whether or not we want to be betting for value or betting or checking to bluff catch. So I think it's close. I think I would lean slightly towards betting this one because of the stuff that he can call with. I think he's going to end up here with a decent amount of Showdown value. more often than he shows up with busted draws that'll bluff. Because also, like, while he may have, even if he did have more busted draws here, it's not a very good river card to bluff. Like, it's just about the worst river card that he can decide to bluff. So a lot of those bluffs that he has are going to check back anyway. So that's also something to consider when you're checking in order to bluff catch. Over on table 2, we flop top and bottom on a pretty connected board. And this is a spot with this particular hand you can check back. There's a lot of value in checking back here. But I also don't hate betting, obviously. I decided to bet, so you do want to bet and get some protection value from 10-jack and hearts, which we totally unblock. But when we get raised, I think we have a pretty clear fold in that spot. So we check with the aces and just goes to showdown and we win. And this might have been another hand that just disappeared forever by the looks of it. Table 1, we go ahead and defend after the big blind opens, small blind calls. You could 3-bet, but I think closing the action in the big blind, this just calling with this hand is perfectly well and good. And the flop checks through and we improve to mid-pair with the nut flush draw. And the small blind leads out for just under half pot. And I think raising is better than calling in this spot. Like, I only have 6 hands on this player in the small blind. But, yeah, I don't know anything really about him. But he shouldn't have that many 3x in this spot. Like, I clearly have more 3x in the big blind than he does in the small blind, even if he is playing a ton of hands. So this raise is pretty credible, and it's almost always driving out the button. And when we do get called, when he does call with like a 3x that doesn't 3-bet, we do have some equity when called. So all in all, I prefer the raise, and it works out. On table 2, looks like we open pre and check call the flop, which I think is fine. Really bad turn, obviously, for us. And we're just going to check fold. Table 3, we limp and call a raise from big blind. Flop bottom pair and an open ender. Pretty standard check call. Without the pair and backdoor diamonds, you can probably just fold this one out of position. But I think we just have too much equity to be folding on the flop here. Turn the nuts, and you can go either way, I think, betting or checking to check raise, or check call and go for river check raise as well, depending on how aggressive the player in position is going to be. On the river, I think standard would be to just bet ourselves to get calls from like 2 pairs and maybe some over pairs that don't believe you, think you have like whiffed king 10 or turning a jack or a queen into a bluff. But yeah, in this instant, I decided to go for a check raise, and this situation is probably better than average to do it because we unblock his value range on the flop that might be scared of this turn card that on the river perceives to now again have the best hand, like queen jack, queen 8, and then obviously sets. It's a reasonable line for them to check back this turn sometimes and then go for value on the river. So I think it's an okay spot to check raise with the set or straight, and then obviously with some bluffs as well. We go ahead and fold the ace king 5-4. Yeah, it might have just been this table down on the bottom that just has all the hands disappear. I really don't know what was going on. So table 1, we 3-bet the jacks. Sand, you can go either way. This player over a small sample looks to be a little loose, so I think leaning towards a 3-bet is fine. Table 3, we open the cutoff, which is standard, and face a 3-bet. This is pretty marginal. Like, calling is standard, but not super happy about it with this kind of hand. We do flop relatively well, given the stack-to-pot ratio of under 2. Like, middle pair, gutter, and backdoor hearts is probably enough to just go with it, and I think just leading out ourselves is best in order to sometimes get folds from over pairs here. So that's what we do. He jams with big old draw. And scoop-a-loops. Table 1, we check back with our jacks and a wrap, which I think is good. Okay, so it shows the hands we lose. That's how it went. Gotcha. Face a half-pot bet on the turn. I think we can go ahead and call. With our actual equity in the hand and then the ability to potentially bluff some cards as well. We river the straight, and yeah, we definitely want to bet for value. The question is, how do we want to size it? And I think we want to size definitely not big, because then you're kind of limiting his calling range to things that might beat you, like kings and queens, that, you know, get scared by this ace river and decide to check against it. So yeah, we end up sizing small and losing to queens, but I think there is value to be gotten there, and especially because you'll want to have some bluffs on that river. Yeah, you won't have too many, but the times you do, you will want to bluff. So looks like there was some action. So table 1, I assume we just check call the flop, and then the turn went check check. That's table 3. So table 2, we check call the flop. I think you can go either way. You can check call or check raise, but you're not going to be check raising very often in this spot versus cutoff versus big blind on the ace high board. So protecting your calling range by check calling with the sets and top 2, I think is okay. Not a very good card for us on the river or on the turn, being the king of spades. So I don't think we can be raising here, even though the stack to pot ratio is getting kind of small. I think we still want to just check and call. On table 3, we just check with our 2 pair. I mean, I actually think on this river card, there is some merit to turning this hand into a bluff on table 3, but you have too much showdown value, I think, to be turning this one into a bluff. 8-10 is probably a better one. Well, it's definitely a better one to be turning into a bluff than King 10, because there's significantly greater showdown value with this hand than the former. And river checks back, and we win. Another bad river card. Bad turn, bad river. I think we just have to check. And, you know, we do have the queen of spades, or the queen of diamonds. So, faced with a bet, I think we'll be in a pretty tough spot, but I would lean towards calling, I think. He checks back, and we win. And looks like that hand may also not have come up, also disappeared. Sorry, guys. Flop the nuts on table 1. Jack high rundown table 2. We fold from under the gun. Slightly tight, but okay. I think we can raise or just smooth call with these queens on this board texture. I think it's a board that, you know, pre-flop raiser that has kings or aces is going to continue betting on pretty often on the turn. Like, for example, this 9, he's going to need a lot of protection. much more so than against my calling range on just the flop. So I think give him some room and go for the turn check raise is the course of action here. River ace is actually pretty good for us. Like, it unlocks a lot of hands that he can be calling us with now on the river that we get value from that would have just folded on blanks. So he makes some aces up. He makes plenty of top pairs that can decide to look us up. So go ahead and bet. And he folds quickly. And just to recap table 3, we checked back the flop, which is fine. Like, the small blind will have a decent amount of queen-queen. Not that many sevens, probably. The big blind certainly will. So I think it's fine to check this one back. And I think calling the turn is pretty standard. And the river queen is obviously pretty bad for us. And I think we can just fold here to the bet. Table 2, we flop decently well, top pair, straight draw. Go ahead and bet. I think you can mix it up here as well with your bets and checks. So in this instance, we decided to bet just around 60%, I believe, and take it down. And this seems like a good spot to wrap up the footage. I hope this was an interesting video for you guys, and I hope the few hands that I was able to bring up here in this right corner to replay was useful to spend some time on. And hopefully for the next video, Stars will fix their software bugs. Anyway, till that time, this is Sean Cobble for Poker VIP. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys later. Bye.